Hello, hello. Welcome to the Total Truth Show. I'm Aldwyn Altuney from the Gold Coast.
And my name is Ken Kleinberg, coming to you all the way from San Diego, California, in the United States of America.
And hi, I'm Tom Cronin, coming to you from Sydney, Australia.
And we'll be with you right after this short introduction.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Total Truth Show, hosted by myself, Ken Kleinberg from San Diego County, California.
And I'm Aldwyn Altuney, known as the Media Queen from the Gold Coast in Australia.
And our goal here on this show is to help you to break away from the mainstream media propaganda and lies, the disinformation and misinformation that's out there in the mainstream, and really help you to start questioning everything and start doing the research for yourself. We want to punch through all of that disinformation and misinformation. Our goal here is to raise global consciousness to quantum critical mass and then pave the way for a new awakened civilization. And we would love for you to come along for the ride. Don't take our word for it. The things that we share here on the show, that goes for our guests too. Start doing the research for yourself. Start going and asking the questions for yourself. Get out there and really find the real truth behind things. So with that, let's get started, you guys. Let's dive into today's episode. Once again, welcome.
Yes, welcome. So excited about this show today. We're going to be chatting about the truth about enlightenment. And Tom Cronin is an amazing guy. He's coming from Sydney. A little bit about this extraordinary guy. He has spent 26 years in finance markets as one of Australia's leading bond and swap brokers. He discovered meditation in the early stages of his career when the anxiety and chaos he was experiencing had hit a crisis point, and it completely transformed his world personally and professionally. He is the founder of the Stillness Project, a global movement to inspire 1 billion people to sit in stillness daily. He's passionate about reducing stress and chaos in people's lives. Nowadays, he does a lot of ongoing work in transformational leadership, coaching, and corporate training, which has seen him work with some of the top companies in the world like Amazon, Qantas, UBS, and Coke. He's spoken on stage at conferences and events like AdNews Summit, A-Fest, Wanderlust, and Mind Heart Connect. He has 6 books published, a meditation app, and he just produced recently the hit film, The Portal. Welcome, Tom.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me along. I'm looking forward to our session today.
Great to have you here. And of course, my amazing co-host, Ken Kleinberg from San Diego. How are you today, Ken?
I am doing awesome.
Fantastic. Enlightenment is such a hot topic, and I know a lot of people lately have been looking at Dr. Hawkins' scale of consciousness. This seems to be circulating around the traps, and for those who haven't seen it, check out the Conscious Community Global Facebook group, because featured in there is this map of consciousness, which talks about our expanded consciousness being at its most heightened point is enlightenment, right? And it says actually there's 700 hertz to 100 hertz is enlightenment, is the most expanded consciousness we will feel. However, I do believe with the Dalai Lama and certain people actually went over 1,000 hertz, I believe, with this the way that we vibrate through life. And I'm sure you could explain this a bit better, Tom. But enlightenment basically is the thing I think that we all crave, whether consciously or unconsciously. And we're going to really dig into this topic today and have a good chat about this. So, Tom, what a change for you to go from finance to doing what you're doing now. So was there a point there in your career where suddenly things just crashed for you and you thought, yes, I really have to, you had anxiety, chaos, etc. Was there a turning point there for you during that?
Yeah, there was a major turning point for me, quite a big fork in the road. In Sanskrit, we actually call this Rashi, R-A-S-H-I, which is a critical sort of, almost like a point of no return. It's a point where change must happen. we can have sort of messages happening in our life where we get these sort of karmic consequences, but we can sort of ignore those and keep going on, and those pain points will increase, but we don't necessarily have to change what we're doing. But a rashi is a point in our life where things either break down or break through. It's like it's a significant point where the continuing trajectory that we're on can't continue. And for me, that happened at 29, where the particular lifestyle that I was living, lots of partying, drinking, drugs, and a lot of obsession with just a general narcissistic sort of hedonistic lifestyle as a broker in finance. And then the universe has this incredible intelligence to guide us, to direct us, to help us evolve and move towards enlightenment. And if we ignore those signals as a collective or as an individual, we tend to get messages and indications to go in a particular direction that's not the current one. And so for me, that was like a major meltdown, a major nervous breakdown, really, at the age of 29, where I had severe anxiety, depression, panic attacks, even to some point suicidal tendencies, about questioning whether I wanted to go on with life. And that was when I really found a whole other trajectory to go on, which was really meditation, mindfulness, decent philosophy, spirituality, Vedic philosophy. And it was kind of like everything that I'd been looking for in my life. I started to find it through this avenue. It was really quite revelatory for me.
Amazing. Sounds a bit like a Wolf of Wall Street story, except the Wolf of Wall Street never quite found enlightenment, I don't think. However, sounds like you were living that hedonistic lifestyle, probably with lots of drugs and coke and all sorts of things, I'm sure, back then. So amazing that you had the foresight or insight to transform that situation and to find this place of peace within yourself. Now, I just saw your movie, The Portal, recently. I absolutely love it. Can you share a bit about what The Portal is about and how you came to do that film?
Yeah, when I found meditation, it was such a game changer for me. I couldn't believe that the anomalies that I was living with, these incredible symptoms, which is the body's way of saying, things just aren't right, need to change, my anxiety and panic attacks and everything. And so when I found meditation, they simply just melted away. I became very passionate about getting this into the households of the world. I couldn't believe that people weren't doing it, and everyone was just going straight for medication to try and resolve their problems. And when I found that there was this other alternative that was incredibly impacting, I became very passionate about trying to find mainstream ways to make this message available. And hot off the heels of The Secret, which took a very esoteric concept, which is the law of attraction, and managed to get omnipresence with that. They really did manage to penetrate, pretty much every country in the world with that, with the film and the book. And so I was very impressed by that and wanted to follow on, because it was very early stages where documentary making was moving into the consciousness sort of space. And even though The Secret was just early stages of that, more around manifestation and, trying to create more wealth in your life, but we sort of really wanted to venture down that route a little bit further with spirituality and meditation and crisis, and why crisis is a tool of evolution. And so that was what inspired us to make the movie and to tell 6 stories that all had their own crisis and managed to liberate themselves from the trappings that caused the crisis and start to create better, more successful lives. And that's where the Portal sort of genesis came from.
It's interesting because just recently too, someone said to me, "Oh, you got to see the movie Soul by Disney. Have you seen the movie Soul?"
I've been meaning to watch it. I've seen the shorts for it, but I've heard good things about it.
Well, there's also a segment in Soul where there's some meditation that happens that actually helps people go from one realm to another realm. And, it's interesting. Someone said once, if you don't have 5 minutes a day to meditate, then take an hour, right? Like if you, make the time to meditate, because it is incredibly powerful. And we have such busyness in our lives now. People are just running around like crazy. To actually make time to meditate is so powerful. And for those who don't meditate, they may not realize it. However, for every successful person I know out there meditates. Every single one of them meditates. And so there's got to be some science behind this. There's got to be something behind why this is so amazing. So can you share a bit of that? What is the science behind meditation that makes it so powerful?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? We live in a society, the Western world, that really needs things to be cerebrally explained, when something that stood the test of time, 5,000 to 7,000 years without the science, it's because people just validate it through experience. And we're such a cerebral society. We like to listen to podcasts and read books and write and read emails and talk and listen. And all of that's very top heavy. And so even when it comes to a meditation practice that removes us from the thinking state and gets us beyond the thinking, we still need to have some science behind it, which is very classic in our society. So there is, fortunately, some profound science behind that. And we can look at it from a physical, mental, and emotional level, and also a spiritual level. And that's why we called the film The Portal, because it's a portal through from the thinking, feeling, and physical realm. So we identify our own existence through the thoughts that we have, the feelings that we experience, and the physicality or our locality in the physical body. That's the shape and the structure of the physical body and its location in a particular place. And so that's generally how we see ourselves and identify as ourselves. And what that does is it leaves us very much in a segregated, separated world of duality. Now, when we meditate and transcend, now not all meditations are going to take you into that transcendent spiritual experience, but having a transcending style of meditation that enables us to go beyond physical, mental, and emotional space and limitations of our own existence, which are very temporary and fleeting, but to have the experience of the eternality of being, which is really the starting stage of enlightenment. Enlightenment can't really eventuate and occur until we get into that ability to access that point of reality, that absolute fundamental reality beyond thinking, feeling, and physicality. So firstly, we've got the non-scientific aspect of that it's just an experience that you can get. And I had a student that I was teaching just a couple of days ago, and he came out of his meditation and he said, literally, I felt like I became nothing and everything all at once. There was no me. I went into a spaciousness. And that was in his third meditation with me. And so what he's starting to realize is that he exists without a thought, without a feeling, and without a physicality. And that's where liberation and freedom really exists. And it's also the starting point of enlightenment, to have that reality starting to be experiential. Now, he can't explain that scientifically. I can't get him to do a study and come out with a particular scientific validation of that experience. But we know that it exists because he just experienced it, and I've been experiencing it for 27 years. So if we want to look at a science behind it, then if we look at the de-excitement of the mind through particular meditation processes, what we find is when the mind is still, that's what we call samadhi. Sama means same, and di means intellect. So the same intellect, the mind is not moving. It's the same because it's in deep stillness or deep silence. When the mind is in deep silence and stillness, and yet we're still awake, we find that we have a profoundly deep state of physiological rest. So that's where the science comes in. We're getting a profoundly deep state of physiological rest. When we get deep physiological rest, we start to see an optimization in the physiology and in the emotional state. So we get out of the sympathetic nervous system into the parasympathetic nervous system. We start to change our biochemistry, and we start to optimize our state of well-being.
I love that. And I've heard the saying that, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And actually, there's some great samadhi documentaries, which are also featured in the Conscious Community Global Facebook group, which I've just popped into the chat there. People can check that out and have a look at some of those docos. They will blow your mind in here. And once you take the red pill, there's no going back to that blue pill, as they say in the Matrix, right? It's amazing when you start to research some of this stuff. It really is mind-blowing and so profound, and it's a sense, isn't it? It's a sense. It's not, you can't see it, but you can feel it. It's like I know that I have my ancestors. I do believe in spirit guides and in like angel type forms. I can't see them, but I can feel them, right? And people might call them ghosts, or there's different versions of these other forms of reality, and it's fascinating when you tap into that. And I think the more we can silence the mind and the monkey chatter, right? This monkey chatter that we have, the more we can silence that, the better. And I must say, meditation was very challenging for me, because I was very much, as a journalist for many years, very much in my head. And it took quite a bit of practice for me to actually slow the mind down. And I realized now, actually, there was times that I was probably meditating and didn't realize I was meditating, like times when I daydreamed, for example. Daydreaming can be a type of meditation, right? So for those who are a bit challenged with meditation, what would you suggest, Tom, as to how to quiet that monkey mind?
Yeah, I think we need to understand what meditation is and why we want to meditate. And it's something that I debunk a lot when I teach transcendental meditation or Vedic meditation, because one thing that we find when we start using these particular styles of meditation where we use a mantra, we find that as the mind de-excites, there's an interesting phenomenon that correlates with that de-excitation in the mind. We find the body drops into a deep state of metabolic rest when we have less activity in the mind. And we use the mantra to quieten the mind down. And you might use breath or some other forms of stilling or quietening the mind, whatever device of meditation you find most relatable. But there's an interesting phenomenon. As the mind quietens and the physical body quietens, what it does is it starts to activate a healing response in the body. And the body has a remarkable capacity to optimize and upgrade itself. And we have this incredible healing capability within the body if we are optimizing the physical realm. And what happens when we go into deep meditation is it bumps the body out of meditation because it activates a restoration and a renovation in the body, which in itself is some form of stimulation. So we find that having thoughts in meditation isn't actually a problem. It can actually indicate sometimes that there's a lot of stress releasing in the physical body. Now, the reason why we think we should have a quiet mind through the entire meditation or stillness of thought is because we think of Buddhist monks that would sit for long periods of time in Zen meditation. Now, the thing with a Buddhist monk is they left home at 6, they took off their clothes, put on robes, they shaved their heads, and they meditated for 6 to 8 hours a day and did a little bit of gardening in the Tibetan monastery, maybe some cooking or cleaning. And so when they were 30, 40, or 50 and they started their daily meditation after many years of it, they weren't getting bumped out because their body wasn't riddled with physiological and energetic stresses. Now, our bodies, having gone through the life that we've all gone through, kids, families, jobs, financial problems, all sorts of things, then we have a lot more stress in our body. So when we go into meditation, we're going to get bumped out many, many times, and that's going to leave you in a kind of busy meditation a lot of the time. So having the proper guidance around your meditation training is critical. If we're looking at enlightenment as the ultimate human experience, and as we've already discussed in the early stage of the show, talking about the stages of consciousness, and enlightenment being one of the highest states we can possibly achieve as a human being, and most humans pretty much having a substandard experience because we're not achieving enlightenment yet, and that's something we should all be striving for, then it's normal for us to accept that we're going to have lots of thoughts and experiences and sensations in our meditation until our vessel is very purified and clear.
Fascinating. Ken, what about you? Do you meditate?
Probably not as much as I should. Now, I've done breath work, to where, I'm concentrating on my breath and all this other stuff. Like I've done like little things like that. And I guess a form of meditation is I would read, something, like a little paragraph of something that's very inspiring. And then I would sit there and kind of meditate on that and, where I need to take that, where I need to further apply that. And obviously, and then there's the obvious aspect of it. I'm a Christian. And so I do have prayer times and different things like that. I do know that that's a form of meditation. But as far as like deep meditation where I'm like just intentional on like, clearing my mind, meditating and stuff like that, to be honest, and Tom, I think you kind of touched on it as you were kind of talking there just a couple of minutes ago. I've got a piece of cat hair up my nose and it's bugging the crap out of me. So sorry if I keep messing with my nose. I think I often have like a large challenge with the quiet mind. Because I know when I go and I start seeking to like meditate and to maybe clear my mind and to maybe get in touch with like the higher energies, the higher frequencies and different things like that. When I go to do that, as you say, if I'm hearing you correctly, I often get bumped out many of times. And it's very, very frustrating. It's very disrupting is the word I want to use. It is extremely disrupting and it's extremely frustrating. Maybe it's because I'm not giving enough patience to the process and I'm not trusting the process. I'm just kind of like expecting me to just be able to shut my mind off and then be in my meditative state and be happy, but that doesn't happen. And like I recognize like that's because I'm human and that's the natural part of the brain and different, and I recognize that, but that doesn't mean it's not frustrating, and that doesn't mean that it's not disruptive.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's two usual, I guess, barriers people have in this journey into the silence of the mind and what we call the state of being. One is that there's just stress in the system, and that's going to bump you out because the physical body, it's like that twitch we get when we're falling asleep. As the mind quietens, the body quietens, that unlocks stress. That unlocking of stress can bump us out. Now, as we start to really continuously, consistently have that stress clearing process. So if we do meditation twice a day for 20 minutes, which is what's recommended, because of the amount of stress that's gone into the system, we really need to work on a particular process of clearing and committing to that clearing process, which is why twice a day, and if not, trying to add in a number of 1 or 2, if not 3 retreats a year in this intense process we call rounding, which is a very powerful clearing process for clearing those stresses out. Now, eventually, that's the first sort of impediment to those still states of meditation. The second one is not that we have a challenge with silence or stillness. A lot of people say, I would be uncomfortable with stillness or silence. What they're uncomfortable with is losing themselves, because the thing that we're addicted to most is actually our identity. And so we have a really strong struggle, which is why we like, a lot of people say, I listen to gratitude meditations, or I like doing this or doing that. And that's because we're still in the personality, we're still in the identity, and we're still craving that identity having a nice experience. And actually, enlightenment is the clearing of that identity and revealing what already prevails and exists currently within each and every human being. The analogy I like to hear I guess, in this point is to share is the sky. Now, we identify as the cloud in the sky, and we're so worried about not being the cloud in the sky, we don't realize that we're actually the sky. We think we're the form that's in the sky. Now, if we let go of the thing that just is the form in the sky, the cloud, and that melts away, we go, holy moly, behind the cloud was blue sky. I didn't know it was there all the time. I thought I was the cloud. And there's this sort of trepidation about letting go of our identification as the cloud without realizing we were actually the sky that the cloud was in.
I like that. So interesting. Wow. And it's interesting, Ken touched on, religion, I guess, being Christian, and, of course, there's so many different religions out there and so many people that pray. So what are your thoughts on that? Have people been meditating, not realizing they're meditating by praying?
It's really interesting when we start to look at religions. I had a very strong religious upbringing, very strong Catholic upbringing. We're doing rosary at night and, going to confession on the weekends in the church. We're going to mass without fail every Sunday. We did grace before dinner every single night. We did Lent and penance and all sorts of things. And so I had a very strong, myself, personal connection to God, to Jesus, and to that faith. And I felt that was a very strong foundation for what eventually emerged into my spiritual experience and spiritual awareness. And I sort of see, not to denigrate religions, to embrace them for what they are, but I see religions as kind of like training wheels on a bike. It's a form and a container and a structure that gives us some form of human construct that allows us to grapple with something that's almost beyond and is definitively beyond human constructs, and was well and truly there before humans came on board on the planet, and will be well and truly here long after humans are on the planet. But for now, whilst we're in the human realm and human dimension at this point in time, in this time sequence, we have these containers that allow us to get some sense of grasp on something that's almost ungraspable, which is this notion of God and then an experience of God. But one of the beautiful things about spirituality and meditation is that it's one thing to pray. What prayer can do in some respects is create divide, segregation, and separation from the thing that we're praying to. What spirituality meditation does, it gives us a unification with the thing that we're praying to. And if we believe in an omnipresent God, we would then must and can only agree to us being a an aspect of that God, a form of the formlessness of that God, because omnipresence can't exclude us. And this might be confronting for some people who are very, what's the right word, are very deep in the construct of their religion. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, and religions play an integral role in helping us start to understand something that's very difficult to understand. And I feel that religion of mine that I came through was a beautiful container that gave me a strong sense of connection. But if we always take it back to something that Jesus said, and you'll find this in the Bible in quite a few different places. Firstly, he mentioned the word "be still," and we know that there's something really profound about his time that he spent every day in stillness. Now, Jesus wasn't kneeling down praying to Jesus. Jesus was actually in deep contemplation, silence, stillness, and union with God. And it's something that we need to start embracing. And we're going to start to see religions moving a little bit more into how do we make this something more than kneeling in a church, listening to a priest, trying to give us a sense of God, and how do we make it an experience that we can have individually through that deep contemplation, that deep silence and stillness. The second thing that's really important, which I find fascinating, is that there's 18 years missing out of the recollection of Jesus's life from the ages of 12 till 30. And there's absolutely no contact at all with Jesus in the Bible between the age of 12 and 30. And then the last 3 years of the Bible about his last 3 years of life. But those 18 years, if you go to northern India, you'll find countless books, many, many books and documentation about his time traveling in the East and exploring a lot of these spiritual practices. And after traveling to the East and who knows what he discovered and experienced, he went back to the Middle East with some of those insights and practices. And that's really where he learned a lot of his mastery from the capacities of what the masters were able to do for thousands of years before Jesus in the Himalayas.
Wow. Fascinating. I didn't know that. No,
we could be opening a can of worms here. So
Well, I was brought up Christian as well, and actually Greek Orthodox, my background, in Sydney. In fact, I was baptized in Sydney in the Greek Orthodox Church. And I've often thought later in life, as much as I believe in God now, I believe, this is my thoughts, is that we're all tapping into the same universal energy. We just have different stories around it and different, this is my belief around religion. There's just different stories around it and different theories, I guess, or different opinions on that. And I guess where religion has lost a lot of credibility, I think, in the past is that there's been so many wars that have happened because of religion, right? How many wars have we had over time because of religion? People say my religion's the right religion, blah blah blah, right? Whereas if we actually come to the essence of it, actually connecting with source energy or this omnipresence, and actually let go of some of those stories, which again is this monkey chatter and the human experience wanting to logically understand things, I guess, or understand things, if we actually just step back from that for a moment and connect with source energy and take away some of those stories, I think we would have a much more peaceful world, personally. So I believe we're tapping into the same energy, personally.
Yeah.
Who knows really what happens. What we do know is when we die, our bodies do become lighter immediately when we die. And so our spirit goes somewhere, right? So what happens with that spirit, who knows exactly? Do you have any thoughts on that, Tom? Actually, what do you think happens with our spirit?
It's a really good question. I can't definitively say. I don't have the knowledge because I haven't been through that process as far as I can recall in this lifetime. And previous lifetimes, I don't recall them. So what I believe anyway, what I intuit and what I sense is that whilst I'm on this particular ball, in this particular solar system, in this particular galaxy, I require physicality for the exhaustion and the expression and experience of my current desires. That might be to have children, to have a house, to eat ice cream. So all of those desires require physicality. And at some point, if I achieve a particular state of enlightenment and the exhaustion of those desires, the physicality requirement might be exhausted and no longer required, and might be going off into some more ethereal existence in other dimensions. Who knows? If I haven't exhausted those desires and I still have unfulfilled desires in this particular body, that ends up no longer being able to carry me through for some reason. It could be a car crash or I get cancer or something. Then those unexhausted physical desires that haven't been completed yet will be, I might need another body to come back and continue on in the exhaustion of those desires and refinement of those desires. I think it was Deepak Chopra once said that we're all exhausting desires and refining our desires through life. And if we go back to enlightenment, and we see one thing that is distinctly different with people that are enlightened and those people that aren't enlightened. And just to clarify, I'm not enlightened. I just wanted to state that here. I'm in the process of enlightening myself. I'm in the process of enlightening myself through a number of modalities, practices, and daily commitments. And if we think of the word enlightenment, it's en is of, and light is of light. And so we get lighter. We become a luminosity. We start to radiate more lightness. We start to feel lighter. We start to feel more attracted to lighter things. And the difference between an enlightened person and a person that's not enlightened is really only one thing. And we take it back to Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Outliers, which looks at people that were outliers in our society, great tennis players or cricket players or golfers and cellists and violinists and writers. And one thing we found with outliers was that they spent a lot more time doing something than someone else. So if Tiger Woods hit a golf ball every day from the age of 3, by the time he's 21, he's going to be pretty damn good at golf. If someone like Donald Bradman, who's a great cricketer in Australia, he started hitting golf balls in his tin shed with a cricket stump, and he had an incredible art for getting his eye in. So he could see the cricket ball like a watermelon because his commitment to daily practice. Now, an enlightened person has just simply allocated a lot more time to sitting in that reflective, deep, silent meditation state to access and start to tap into what's inherently within them, which is an inner journey. Now, most of us are really good at doing an outer journey. So we're really good at looking through Instagram. We're really good at shopping. We're really good at gambling. We're really good at cheering our football team. We're really good at gossiping. We're really good at following the Kardashians. We're really good at watching what Trump's doing. And we're very much concerned about the outer world. And the only difference coming back to an enlightened person and not an enlightened person is simply the allocation of time on a daily basis to looking at the inner world.
Wow, I love all that. And so 20 minutes twice a day, you say is ideal for meditation. Is that correct?
Look, if you want to just have the bare minimum to start to explore that inner world in relationship to the allocation of time to exploring the outer world, it's not a bad start. You could certainly do a lot more if you wanted to speed up the process.
So with you then, Tom, do you have a set practice that you do every day? I know you travel a lot for speaking gigs, etc. What do you do in your life?
Yeah, I do a number of different modalities because, meditation is obviously one big component to accessing that inner silence and inner stillness and state of wisdom and knowledge and inner peace and inner quiet, all those sorts of things. So I meditate twice a day, morning and evening. Sometimes it's 20 minutes. Sometimes it's a lot longer. Sometimes I'll do a few hours if I'm feeling compelled, but that's not a recommendation to people. Just start with 20 minutes, morning and evening. And then on top of that, it's really about looping back and doing embodiment work. So cleaning up the physical form, the mental form, the emotional form, tending to those 3 vehicles that we have. We're not the thoughts, we're not the physicality, and we're not the emotions. That's what we have as like our spacesuit to experience life on planet Earth. And that's the beautiful thing about a meditation practice. It realizes us as not the form, the mental, physical, emotional, but the spirit that is currently in the form and the form's in it. So when we come back and start to tidy up the embodiment work, so I do saunas, I do gym, I do yoga, I do breath work, I make sure I drink lots of green smoothies and, from the veggie patch, and put in really good things and keep the vessel very purified, constantly purifying the mind, checking my thought forms, how positive or negative are my thought forms? Am I running on an old operating system that was inherited and coded into me from genetics, through our ancestry, through our society? Or am I sovereignly having my own independent thought forms? And what are my emotions like? And what am I dropping into low frequency emotions, going back to that consciousness chart? Am I down in shame and guilt? Being a Irish Catholic, there was a lot of that, and I'm still working on some of those lower frequencies that still tend to occupy the physical form. It takes a lot of time to get some of those lower toxic energies out of the body. And enlightenment really is just the clearing out of all that stuff in the muck.
Now, you had mentioned a couple things earlier, way earlier in the conversation. You had alluded to people that typically run towards the affirmations and different things like that. Now, I've done affirmations before. I don't know if I can find them actually useful or helpful, really, because maybe it's just that I didn't stay faithful with it for long. But tell me a little bit about like people that use affirmations and they think that that's meditating. I think you alluded to the fact that it's actually not, if I heard you correctly. I may not have. But so what about the use of affirmations?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I use, I guess, to some degree, affirmations. And what we want to do is we want to start to understand, and this is a really exciting time that we're in for us as a species, because we're taking spirituality, which is let's remove ourselves from the world and have an enlightened experience. So now let's be in the world and not only take that spiritual experience of enlightenment, but then how do I actually play with this quantum field? And this is what's really exciting for me, is to take it into a whole new era of playing with the field of mechanics, playing with the field of manifestation, playing with the field of physicality, knowing that every form and phenomenon has been extracted out of the field of formlessness as an intention or a desire to make that become a reality. And so our thoughts precede action, our thoughts precede manifestation. These glasses cannot be designed and manifest unless someone had the intention and the thought and the desire to design those glasses first and foremost. So that entry point from formlessness and pure potential, which is the entire field that we're in, to the actual object, like this pen, they had to make sure that there was a design that had a metal clip on it, a black lid, a white body, and then particular, design and fonts for the actual ink in the actual white body. All of that had to be a construct of the mind before it became a physical construct. And before it was a physical construct and before it was a construct of the mind, it was just infinite possibility. And so, yes, thoughts that impress upon the formlessness can lead to the manifestation of that said thought. But we must do more than that as well. We must work upon the laws of magnetism, which is that the frequency aligned with that thought must also be vibrating in the physical form. And that physical form becoming a frequency that emits like a Wi-Fi modem, a frequency out into the ether, which starts the laws of attraction. And then it takes time because the physical world is very dense. So I do meditate and transcend in meditation, access and become the void, the space, the quantum field. And then with the quantum field and my portal of my brain, which is literally the entry or access point to that field, and then it channels through my brain into life itself. And so I'll give some examples just so the audience can start to learn how to play with this quantum field.
Yeah, I'm almost at this point a little lost. Like I kind of like veered off here, and I'm like, okay, I'm not sure if I can wrap my head around this yet. So, yes, please explain.
So, for instance, I was in finance as a broker, and I was really wanting to go out on my own as a meditation teacher and make a big impact in the world. And I really started to see, with the help of a really good coach, and I recommend people getting coaches, to help us see what we don't know, or we don't know what we don't know, so get someone to help us see that. So this coach was really good at helping me see things about my potential that I couldn't see myself. And when I started to see things about my greater potential, and with his help, then we started to work on the mechanics of manifesting that. So one of the things that I visualized was me actually speaking on stage in front of large audiences. Now, I'd never spoken on stage and never spoken in front of more than 3 people in my life. But I started to play around that, and I visualized and encapsulated the feeling of what it would be like for me to walk on the biggest stage in Sydney, which is called the Entertainment Centre at the time. And I visualized walking through the big purple curtains onto a huge black stage with 10,000 people in the auditorium, and then the one microphone stand. This was before lapel mics. And I visualized that many, many times over after my meditation. So I was impressing into the field, the quantum field of possibility, the idea of that existence. And by planting that seed, not just as a thought, but as an actual physical experience. And what was it like for me to walk on stage comfortably, jovially, making jokes and making people feel moved and feel inspired and getting a standing ovation. And within 6 months of having those intentions and visualizations, I was asked to go and speak on stage in a large conference in Mexico called A-Fest. And I was in front of 500 people. Now, it wasn't the Entertainment Center, and it wasn't 10,000 people. Usually the universe contracts a little bit from your initial intention. So tends to be a natural contraction for some reason. I'm not sure why, but there is, from what I've noticed. The second one was, I'd never written a book, but I visualized writing a book. And I thought it'd be really cool because if I write a book, I can get my message out to more people, not just with a film, not just with talking on stages, but actually having a book out. So I visualized having a book signing in a bookstore in New York. Now, I didn't know if there was a bookstore in any particular street in New York. So I Googled bookstores in New York and I thought maybe there's one on Broadway because Broadway is a street in New York and I think it's a pretty big street. So I'll Google bookstores in New York and I found a bookstore on Broadway in New York. And I looked at the, you can go to Google the images of the street level. And so I looked at the image of the bookstore on Broadway and I visualized people out the front of that bookstore with my book in their hand in a queue for me to sign the book that I'd written. And I visualized that, not all the time, just every now and then. And I think I had it on my vision board. And then a few years later, when we had our film screenings of The Portal, we did a 25-city tour of the US from West Coast to East Coast. So we started in LA, went up the whole of the West Coast, all the way up from Portland to Seattle and across, winding our way across the USA and ended up finishing that tour in New York. And there I was in New York in a cinema. It was in East Village. It wasn't on Broadway and it wasn't in a bookstore. It was in a cinema in East Village. But there was a big queue of people after each screening of the film would queue up with the Portal book, which we were selling at the screenings. And then they were asking me to sign the book that I'd written. And so there was just two examples of having the thought, the impression, the intention, and the feeling of that reality happening in the field, and then the field organizing events around that to make that happen.
Interesting. It's like was touched on in The Secret, but The Secret didn't talk about action. The Secret film.
Yeah, you need action. That's right. That was my concern, is it didn't give us they were falling short a little bit of the tools and the mechanics of how to make that happen. So what I would suggest here, Ken, is to have a deep transcending meditation, going into the void, getting out of your own individualized experience, starting to access the field where all potential exists. And then from there, where all possibility lies, start to leave the impression of your thought form into that field and the feeling of that thought form that you want to see manifest. So if it's an idea about you that you're in the process of becoming, because we're always in the process of becoming, who you are today is a very different person to who you were 5 years ago. So if we get intentional about that, if you know that the person you are today is different than the person you were 5 years ago, then who's the person you're going to be in 5 years' time? And start exploring, who do you want to be and what does that look like?
Yeah, love that. Oh, loving this conversation. We've got Kat Miller with us. Hello, Kat, on Facebook. She's saying, love this as well. We've got Perfect and Sinless on YouTube saying hello. We've got Facebook user. If you are on Facebook, please allow StreamYard to see who you are so we can acknowledge you. Dolores Cannon wrote a book on Jesus' journey. Thank you so much for that, Facebook user. And for all those joining us, Robert, here we can see on Facebook as well. Thank you for joining us. Let us know, where are you joining us from? And if you have any questions for Tom or for any of us here today, then please pop your questions, comments in there. What are you getting from this conversation? Let us know. We like to make this interactive with our shows. I must say, I'm loving this conversation. I think this is incredibly powerful, what we're touching on here. And for some people, it might even seem too simple. Right, this whole thing about just feel it, think it, and it'll manifest. Right, it's obviously there's a lot more than that. But I think as human beings, we like to complicate things, don't we? We like to make things harder than they are. It's like we've been conditioned to live in drama ever since we were kids, right? And we know from the media, mainstream media. I mean, just watch Out of Shadows if you haven't seen it yet, on how the media programming has had so many people live in fear and live in drama. And so really, it takes a concerted effort to actually, let some of that drama go and to actually notice, to get conscious where we've been unconscious on how we're actually doing life. So what are some of the best ways that we can actually get conscious, Tom, for those watching right now and tuning in, or if you're watching the audio later on the podcast platforms, what are some of the best ways to actually get conscious?
Yeah, it's what we're up against is a huge, intense process of indoctrination, which I'm not to say whether it's on purpose or not, but what we are seeing definitively is a huge wave of centuries of indoctrination of how to live and breathe. And what we have as a very accepted way of living is to live very substantially, to live in a fairly substantial state of health and acknowledge and accept that. The capacity to be sovereignly healthy is innate for all of us, and it doesn't take a lot to do that. But what we're deeply coded and conditioned with is to seek pleasure regardless of the health consequences. And that's why we'll see ads for McDonald's and Coca-Cola and Krispy Kremes without any problems or concerns in our society. And that indoctrination again, that this is where fulfillment lives. This is how you can improve your life. This is how you can be happier. So we have deep indoctrination into our state of health, and we have, or lack of health. We have also deep indoctrination in the idea of drama. So there's not a Netflix or Stan or Prime TV, Apple TV show, movie that doesn't have embedded deeply in it a code of ignorance, which is that my fulfillment is derived from good things happening to me, and my unhappiness is derived from bad things happening to me. So if someone says they love me, I'm going to feel amazing, and I can't believe that this is so good. And this is, a classic state of the drama that we see in our movies and TV shows. And then when that person that brought us so much love and happiness and joy, when they decided to go off to someone else's life to bring them happiness and joy, they were in a state of abject misery. And we hear songs by Michael Bolton or Mariah Carey that I could never live without you. And so that through all of our media is so deeply coded and conditioned into us that I'm highly reactive to life circumstances. This makes me feel good. Oh, this makes me feel bad. Oh, this makes me feel good. This makes me feel bad. And we're in this constant undulation of peak and pleasure dynamics where we get greater and greater cravings out of our deep dips that we're getting to try and get big highs, which is creating a more and more bipolarized society. And that's just a deep code that's in our society. And as a person that starts to transcend that through their meditation, this is why the transcending meditations are so important, because we start accessing the field of consciousness, the field of wisdom, the field of, we call them seers. A seer is S-E-E-R. A seer is a sage or an enlightened one or a wise one that can actually see through the veil of that conditioning and start to almost find it quite comical that this is the way humans are still existing, even knowing that that knowledge and wisdom has been available to us for over 10,000 years. It's funny, I was only just watching a documentary last night, and it was on Netflix, of all channels, but it was a documentary about some revelations around what they believe and are starting to reveal very enlightened and civilized societies going back 60,000 years ago. They found one particular sort of pyramid-shaped construct in the jungles of Java, and I haven't watched the whole show. It got past my bedtime, but I'll be watching the rest tonight. And just one civilization they found in there that had constructed this incredible, profoundly complex temple-like pyramid in the jungles of Java. They're now dating it to around 60,000 years ago. And they said that the technological development for them to be able to build this, predating the Ice Age, it's mind-boggling. And so this intelligent civilization, that's call them the human species, and yet you still look at myself included, the dumbness of our species at times is quite laughable in some respects, because I'm part of that tidal wave or current of what current human species is. And sometimes it's almost absurd that we're becoming less evolved and less intelligent, which is potentially catastrophic for us as a species.
Now, it's interesting that I want to be careful here, because we could easily go off on a big rabbit trail here. So meaning not that I'm afraid of rabbit trails. I just don't want to derail us off of the topic of why we brought you on the show and everything. So that's why I'm kind of being careful, because this could go into a lot. But you talk about these structures, these pyramid structures. Well, it's interesting that it's not just found where you said these pyramid structures are actually there. I believe there's a few of them that are found in Antarctica, and they've been covered by snow. And if you're looking real careful enough, and if you look at a map, you can see the pyramid structure in the snow, just peeking through the snow caps. And it just goes to beg the question, if there was if there was in the past a society that had that kind of technology to build that kind of structure, and as far as what I've heard from some other sources, I mean, they had plumbing in there and everything. You know, if you've got a society that's smart enough and has a technology for that kind of thing, the question is what's been hidden from us now? Because it's, you know, it does beg the question. And then they had, you know, there are some sources out there that would say that they had great healing technologies at that time too. Now, some of it was spiritual, obviously, and other, you know, there's some other technology. Now, I don't know if I'm sounding woohoo or wonky here, but I'm just saying it does beg the question, you know, what kind of technology, what kind of healing stuff has been hidden from us nowadays? If that was back then, and we're now in 2023, and I'm willing to bet that technology that we think we know is out there is not at all what's really out there.
I'd probably give it a little bit of a slant or tweaking, because I know where you're going and I appreciate that. It's less about what the technology is that was there. It's what the wisdom and the knowledge that was available. And so knowledge is always available. Wisdom is always available. It's just that they were able to tap into it and use it. Like I said, you know, these glasses were always potential to be made, just as PayPal was, and just as a remote control car on Mars was always the potential to be made because it's been made, which means that it always had the capacity to be made. And what we know in the field is that anything that is ever made, never constructed, and ever created, always had the potential to be created. It's just that it took some human a particular point in time to tap into that state of awareness that could draw in that information and start to do something with it. And so what's in that field right now is infinite as well, but it's always there and always has been there. It's just that some humans along the way, whether it's a civilization, a group of people, a collective, or an individual, had the capacity to open their mind into that field and tap into that source of knowledge and information to do what they did. And what's been happening more and more is, and again, I'm not sure if that's purposely done or whether it's just by default, is immense distraction and dumbing down. So scrolling through our Instagram and TikTok to watch people dancing and making chai lattes is an immense dumbing down of our potential as a human being. And you came back to the original question, Aldwyn, which I don't think I answered, which was how do people become more conscious? The first thing, how do we become less dumb, is to stop scrolling and watching really dumb things. And that's not to be derogatory. It's about to realize our innate potential that we're being distracted immensely from, and to start tuning into the capacity as a human being to be optimally, sovereignly healthy and to be optimally, sovereignly, blissfully, consciously aware. And it's just simply some tweaking of your day, some simple practices. Be mindful of what you're putting into your body as a liquid. Be mindful of what you're putting into your body as a food. Be mindful of what you're putting into your brain as information. Be mindful of what you're doing as far as clearing your brain and accessing wisdom and intelligence, which is innate. All these things are just really simple. We don't have to change our day that much. You know, I did that for 16 years as a broker, still working on a trading room floor. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to become perfect and enlightened. Like I said, I still have fallibilities. I still grapple with my own human constructs that I'm working on. And I still have pain and suffering at times. And that's something that I'm becoming more aware of as a mechanism to help me become a better human being, rather than me to self-medicate or run from. And we get greater and greater at tuning into that intelligence and realizing that it's actually supporting us, it's guiding us, it's mentoring us through the pain. And that's something that as we become more adaptable, more intuitive, more responsive to that, we start to live better and more fulfilling lives.
Well, it's also interesting. One other thing I wanted to go back to as well is something that you had mentioned when you said you were visualizing yourself on a stage, 10,000 people in the room. I noticed that when you were giving that illustration, you were giving details that showed confidence, that showed you were comfortable with that showed you said that you were making jokes and trying, being funny and stuff like that. However, I also noticed that while you were describing that scenario, I had an entirely different experience. Now, while granted, the day, when the day comes and I get asked to speak somewhere, about the research I've done, here and this and da. Yeah, I'm sure I'll be really excited about that. But the moment I walk on that stage, I'm sure I'm going to feel some of the feelings I was feeling as you were describing that, a room full of 10,000 people. I'm going to be nervous and jittery and I'm not sure if scared is the right word for it, but those are some big shoes to be stepping in. And so it's funny that when you were describing that, that's what I was feeling. And so I guess the question I have around that is, is it normal? Yes, I think it is normal. But two, how do I shift that into more of an experience that you were describing? Because I just found that very interesting that you described it that way, that you described confidence. You described the fact that you were making jokes. That wouldn't necessarily be me.
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's a fair bit of work that needs to happen to get to that point of unruffability. So there's a beautiful Sanskrit word called tatiksha, which means to be unruffled by the circumstances of life. And this unruffability, which means not to be perturbed or disturbed or, impressed upon by the circumstances of life that changes your state, comes only from the freedom of the occupant or the ego. As we lose and dissolve and melt away those clouds that we identify as ourself, our ego, our identity, our personality, which is the thing that needs confidence to overcome fears. We've got this polarity of fear and then courage or confidence. But if we remove the constructs of the ego, which has embedded within it confidence and fear, then we remove both the need for confidence or the concern for fear. And we just have objective awareness in that present moment. So there's nothing to get ruffled. And so as we have less ego, and like I said, just to confirm so people don't get confused, I still have some ego. So I still might get some degree of trepidation, but I have less and less than I used to. So what happens is that most of those tenets or characteristics or constructs of the ego become less prevalent in our life. And what we're seeing, unfortunately, in our world is actually the ego being boosted on steroids or fertilizer because of social media, likes, comments, shares, and how we're being seen. And one of the things that really boosts the ego's prevalence in our existence is the attraction or the fear of being seen. And we're seeing that happen more and more because it just didn't happen in the old days. You'd go to school and, there was just a few people that saw you, whereas these days, 10,000 people can see if you've got an Instagram, that you've got a lot of followers on. And so all of a sudden that means that your ego becomes highly inflated, and that means all the characteristics that are in the ego become highly inflated as well, which is why we're seeing a lot of major problems in teenagers these days, simply because they just got bigger egos. And people used to think having a big ego means you've got a big head or a big confidence. It just means that you've got all the characteristics that are in the ego, and DeMartini says there's 4,216 of them. That goes with fear, shame, guilt, and all the others. They just get exacerbated, heightened, and we're more susceptible to the slightest little impact on the ego having a huge ramification. But as we have less and less ego, that means we're having less and less ramifications, less and less impressions, which means we're more and more sovereign to walk on stage unruffled and undisturbed. The fact is there's just a person standing on stage delivering some information to a particular audience that might need to hear it. And then what happens is we have less need for it to have to be something other than what it objectively is, and it's just present moment awareness.
It's interesting. And the other thing that's come to my mind as you were just explaining that too is, I know for me, like one of my deepest struggles is constantly battling with what I think other people are thinking, what people think of me. It can happen all of a sudden, and it could be a conversation that really and truly, honestly, was just a conversation. There was nothing else there, nothing else to worry about. But then later on in the day, like I'll come home from whatever, and all of a sudden I'll be like, oh, I probably should have said it this way. Oh crap. I wonder if they thought this about this. And I wonder if they thought this about this. And then before I know it, this whole scenario has turned into something that it's not. And then I hold on to that for like days and weeks until finally the opportunity arises and I actually get a chance to kind of like break the silence that partly was created by me with the person, only to find out there was nothing there to begin with. So with someone that has those kind of, I don't want to put it like struggles or whatever, what would you say? Because this is something that I've been battling with for a very, very long time. It's something that I've been working through, getting better at. And yes, I have gotten better, but it's still there. And I still struggle with it. And it's very frustrating for sometimes battling through that and then holding on to it and then holding on to it and then condemning myself. It's just a whirlwind of a mess. So what would you say to someone who struggles with something like that? And so in light of what you've been talking about, because I think it definitely applies.
Yeah, let's take you through a process then. So let's just say you're in that experience of regret about something you'd said or something that you'd done and wish you'd done it better, and you're in your lounge room. Let's just say right this very moment, you're in the lounge room having that thought. Now that thought is a construct in the mind that is creating a disturbance upon your existing reality. Now, your existing fundamental reality is that you're sitting on your sofa in your lounge. Now, let's just take the thought out of the situation. And now there's just 5 senses in awareness of this present moment. There's 5 senses in present moment awareness. That is what you see, taste, touch, hear, and smell. Now, there's no construct in the mind of the thought. Okay, so if there's no thought about that particular scenario, which is not happening in this present moment, you're just sitting in your sofa and there's nice leather under your legs or sofa fabric, and there's carpet under your feet, and there's, maybe a cat that's sitting on your lap, and then there's the smell of cooking in the kitchen. And if you came to present moment awareness, you'll find that there is absolutely zero disturbance happening in that moment other than the objective fundamental reality of this here now. And in conscious awareness, which is I'm not thinking, but I'm experiencing the bliss of this moment, and I'm liberated from anything that's not happening in this moment, what happens is an absolute peace. Now, what you'll do is if at some point in the future, in another now moment, which is just a collage of now moments, at some point in the future, if you get some information that would be a phone call from someone that said, you know how you said that thing? Then you could digest that information when it arrives. Okay. But until then, there's absolutely zero existence of that reality happening in this present moment, because there is only one reality, which is the seen reality of this moment here. And it's not happening right here, right now. So it's about mastery of the mind, because the mind hijacks your reality moment after moment after moment.
Hell yes, it does.
And that's just because you've allowed it to. It's like a wild bucking bronco that's never been broken in. And so you've just been letting it for the last, how old are you now? 35 years of your life. Letting it do what letting it do what it wants to do. And so we have to work at this. And look, I still have my mind sometimes hijack my moments of reality as well. Just only the other day, just to let people know my own fallibility here, because I was only giving Ken instructions of something that I need to tell myself sometimes. I walked off stage after presenting a keynote in front of this was 2 weeks ago, in front of a large audience of school principals. Now, they were a tough crowd, and the speaker that came off before me came off and whispered in my ear and said, "Good luck, Tom. They're a really tough crowd. They just weren't laughing at our jokes, and they were just quite unmoved." And I did my 1 hour keynote, and admittedly, I didn't get a roaring, raving sort of accolade from the crowd, which I'm kind of used to. And I thought I'd completely blown it. And it was the first time I'd done a speaking gig with my speaker agency that I just, been signed on with. And it was a new agency. And I kind of thought, damn, I really think and for a couple of weeks, I was grappling with the fact that I hadn't performed like I should have, and that I let them down, and that I hadn't, and so there's a little bit of disturbance, not too much. There's just a little nagging in the back of my mind, And funnily enough, just yesterday I got a phone call from the agency, and they said, "Wow, we finally got hold of the organizer of the event. They absolutely loved you. That they thought you were one of the best speakers there, and we've got another gig that we'd like to book you on." And I was just like, "How did I, for 2 weeks, create a totally different reality?"
Right.
You know, that was so distorted from what was. None of it was real, and the only thing that I had that could truly be real was when and if I ever got any information to give me some validation about what the actual situation was. But unless I had that, then I didn't need to even bother with that scenario because it wasn't a reality.
See, now the interesting thing is when I'm going through some kind of scenario like that, I will sit there and I will try to block it out of my mind. I will try to fight with it. I will try to, grapple. I will try everything I possibly can. And oftentimes it's in frustration and to my defeat, because as soon as I think that I have released it and it's done, it creeps up again somewhere else. And it's constantly an exhausting fight when that does happen. And so, and I've had one other person in my life that has said, that has literally said, "Don't fight with it then. Accept the fact that it's there and, kind of like rise above it." But even that I find is difficult to do. So how do you release it?
We can talk about prevention or cure. The first step would be prevention. So I would ask you, in your 72 20-minute pieces of time allocation on a daily basis, how many 72 20-minute portions of your day do you allocate to mind mastery and sitting in stillness and silence? The second thing is, and that's probably one dilemma. So I spend minimum 2 out of 72, which is peanuts, really.
What's the equation you're using? What's 72?
So we have 24 hours in a day.
Okay.
And every hour has 3 portions of 3 portions of 20 minutes. So 24 times 3 is 72, which means that you have, in a pie chart of your daily allocation of time, 72 20-minute slices of pie that you're dedicating to some form of activity, whether it's sleep, toilet, shower, eating, cooking, making love, going to the movies. It's a portion of time, 72 20-minute pieces of pie. And what we would ask our audience is, how much in those 72 20-minute pieces of pie do you dedicate to finding enlightenment, to sitting in stillness, to mastering your mind, to finding the truth? Not finding the truth in a book or a podcast, not even through me, but in the innate essence of being, the inner essence of wisdom. So that's the first one, that's prevention. But when it comes to cure, well, that's really a process that we have to go into in that particular moment. Start to, from conscious, and this is why meditation, particularly transcending meditation, is so important, because it gives us access to the conscious awareness. We call it Sakshi Kutashta. Sakshi Kutashta is the silent witness of consciousness itself now watching my mind. If we don't have access to Sakshi Kutashta, then we don't have access to the conscious witness, and we just have the mind. So Descartes, the French philosopher, says, "I think, therefore I am." And he only defined his existence through thinking. Whereas I would say I am, and I think as well. And from the conscious awareness, I can watch the nature of the mind and go, "Hey, dude, nah, don't do that. That's not serving you. Don't have that thought. Let's just put a pause on that thought, and let's maybe swap it for another thought. And let's just be proactive about what you're doing with those tendencies of your mind, and start to correct them, and start to refine them, and start to upgrade them." And then we get real mastery, because if we can master the mind and the body, then we really start to become a sovereign citizen, which can scare the heck out of governments. But we don't want to go there either.
Yes. Oh, this is absolutely brilliant. Loving this. Now, that's a really good point you mentioned there, Ken, because I think a lot of people do struggle with this, beating themselves up over stuff. Oh, I should have said this. I should have done that. In fact, I was just doing a speaking gig the other day, in fact, just a few weeks ago, at the Worthy Women Summit. And I shared this story of when I was playing table tennis and interviewed by the Manly Daily in Sydney when I was 10 years of age. And I normally share it in a certain way. And this time I actually shared it differently. And I came off stage and I thought, oh my gosh, I forgot to share that thing that I normally share in that part of the story, right? And then there I was for the rest of the summit going around and explaining to people that I'd forgot that bit and actually sharing that bit of the story that I forgot, right? And in fact, people were coming up to me going, oh, I loved your segment. It was really useful. So it's interesting that how hard we can be on ourselves, no matter how much work we've done on ourselves, right? And, you know, I've done so many different courses, speaker training, God knows what, and there's still times I come up and think, oh, I forgot that thing or whatever. And so I think that the trick is, I think, just noticing, oh, here I am beating myself up again, right? Oh, okay, there it goes again. And actually having some fun with it and just noticing. I think half the thing is just getting conscious where we've been unconscious. And this is what, you know, I love about your stillness project here. And I want to just mention the Maharishi project, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi in 1960. What happened there with transcendental meditation, that this phenomenon appeared back then, that with some meditation practice, that the crime rate was reduced by 16% on average back in 1974 with this particular practice. Now, you probably know more about this, Tom, but, you know, meditation has been proven over time that when a certain number of people come together and meditate at the same time, it can reduce crime rates and can have an amazing ripple effect that's so much more powerful than just the number of people who are doing that meditation at that time. So, Tom, can you talk a little bit about like the profoundness of this when we actually come together and we unite in these sovereign practices, in these amazing well, it is practice, it's ongoing practice, isn't it? When we come into stillness, which we have been so educated to not do that. We've been brought up to keep busy. In fact, even the word business has the word busyness in there, right? We are just busy in business, and there's this like rat race that we talk about, right? This rat race. And so it really takes something to come to stillness, to come to meditation for our own peace and for the peace of the world as well. So maybe if you could go in a little bit more, Tom, into the Stillness Project, this global movement to inspire 1 billion people to sit in stillness daily, and what impact that you hope to have with the Stillness Project.
Yeah, one of the things that I could see was the dramatic shift that happened in my life through a simple act of closing my eyes and doing a particular transcending style of meditation. It was an absolute game changer. So that was the first step in the process. Like, holy moly, like, I can't believe this happened. Like, just within weeks, I was, you know, struggling with mental health, leave from work. I couldn't go to work. I had anxiety, depression, put on pharmaceuticals, seeing psychiatrists, psychologists, suicidal. And then I just closed my eyes with a strange primordial vibration, repeated inside my head, went into a deep state of meditation. And all those anomalies melted away because I went out of the sympathetic into the parasympathetic nervous system. And I started to expand my mind beyond conditioning mind, thought-filled mind, into a mind of infinite wisdom, which is not my infinite wisdom. It's just the field of infinite wisdom that we all have access to because we all are it. And then I thought, holy moly, like, what would happen if more people did this? This is kind of crazy. Maybe we don't need pharmaceutical companies as much, and maybe we don't need as many prisons, and maybe we don't need this. And so I became very passionate, probably a little bit annoying for friends and family at that point in time, because I could see that this thing that no one really knew about, need to know about it. And I became a bit of a soapbox person where I wanted to find ways to make this accessible and integrated into the world. And I guess part of that's still playing out today by me having this conversation today. It was really about inspiring people to pick up at least a portion of their day and dedicate it to withdrawing from the outer world and exploring the inner world. And whatever modality that they use for that, whether it's transcending styles of meditation or any other forms of meditation, but really less about how can I visualize having more cars. It's more about how do I find inner peace, and from there come back, and if you want to manifest more cars, do that. But, let's start with finding the bliss of being first and foremost. So the Stillness Project was really a commitment. And, these days, when I came out of finance, I was very alpha male and still had lots and lots of ego. And so that translated into even my business at the time. Let's conquer the world and get 1 billion people meditating. These days, I'm not attached at all. If 1 billion people start meditating, that'd be pretty cool. But I just do what I like doing and enjoy the process along the way. I kind of let go of that big burden of having to be the one that is the savior of the world. And that was a bit ego-driven, even in the spiritual sort of drive that I had. So I've more about just, doing whatever I can do and enjoy it while I do it.
I love that. And breaking it down into segments, I think, is so important. And some people might have heard here of the Pomodoro technique, where you have 25 minutes of focused attention and then 5-minute break. And there's actually an app that I found the other day called Forest, which actually you can actually grow trees in those 25-minute breaks. It's a pretty cool app. That in 25 minutes, and actually the other day I was in the 25-minute period, I picked up the phone and it actually said to me, put down the phone. So it's actually, this artificial intelligence is becoming pretty amazing now, I must say, but really breaking things down, because often I think our mind can just way overcomplicate things, and you can really become trapped by your own thoughts, really. And so enlightenment, we're talking about the truth about enlightenment today. Enlightenment is lightening the burden, lightening the load. And, we've become so addicted to commercialism, to having more, doing more, and social anxiety is a massive thing now as people are scrolling like crazy. They've forgotten how to communicate with each other, right? And now we've got cyberbullying and all these things. And as you say, people are attaching so much of their self-worth to how many followers they have and how many likes and viewers and whatever. And the thing is, if you impact one person with something you're doing, it's worth putting it out there. And that ripple effect is so huge. And yet so many people also are so impatient with this journey as well. And this is why, like just looking at podcasts, for example, podcasts now, 2018, there are only 500,000 podcasts worldwide. Now we have 2 to 3 million podcasts, and 44% of those podcasts don't have more than 10 episodes out there, right? In fact, most of them only have 3 episodes. So this is how people just don't have patience now. They a lot of people, right? And so it really takes something to actually get conscious of what we're talking about here today, and actually to embody and to make time, make room in your day for these practices. Do you actually have a set time that you meditate, Tom, or do you sort of work with what's going on?
I generally meditate when I wake up in the morning, and sometimes that might be 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. So I like to start the day with a foundation of sitting in stillness and silence with my meditation practice. And the analogy I like to use here is a tree, before it grows up, will grow down first. And that's because it gets nutrients from underneath the surface, and it gets stability underneath the surface. And if you look at a tree that doesn't grow down deeply, and when a slightest wind or storm comes along, it will topple over, which is happening to a lot of humans. They don't have a deep sense of foundation in their own reality, because they're defined by the outer world. How many likes, how many friends, how successful, how much money. And so we topple over very easily when one of those distorting realities starts to, affect us or influence us. So sometime in the morning, planting the seeds of stillness and silence and getting connected to being. And then sometime in the afternoon as we're fading, so sort of after this call, I'll probably go and meditate, which is around, where are we at now? Sort of getting close to, before dinner time, getting close to the evening time. Before dinner time, sometime around 4 to 7 is a nice time to meditate. I did just wanted to loop back, if it's okay, because I felt there was a nice little loop that needed to be sort of sewn up when we were talking about grappling with being critical of ourselves, because I know it's a reality that a lot of your audience will be probably struggling with. And there's something that we can really learn from AI. Now, with humans, when we do something like me speaking on stage, I might have done something that I probably felt I could have done better. You talking about your talk, you could have done better. Ken talking about something he could have said better. And we've all done something that we could do better, which means that we have information available to us to make the next experience through self-learning better than the past experience. Now, if we look at AI has this phenomenal capacity to self-learn, and it will look at what it's doing and it will learn how to do it better. Now, the difference between AI and a human doing that is a human goes, oh, I can't believe I did that. I'm so terrible. I'm so bad. And you make all these opinions and judgments about what we did wrong, rather than just going, that's valuable information. I will take that information and I will make my next experience better. Now, AI is doing that all day long. I'll take that information, I'll make the next thing better. I'll take that information, I'll make the next thing better. I'll take that information, I'll make the next thing better. Without the subjective, egotistical opinion about whether it's good or bad. Now, that's the only thing we can do here, is take that component of judgment out of the situation and just make the next situation better, self-learn. And if we can self-learn faster than we're currently self-learning, then who knows, we might be able to, I don't know if we'll be able to keep up with AI, but we might be able to at least improve the way we're doing things.
I think you make a very, very, very powerful point. And Another thing I want to just speak to is Aldwyn, you were talking about these people that are on Instagram and you know, they're just so consumed with this image that they're portraying and the likes and all that other stuff. You know, it's interesting. It reminded me of somebody I know at my gym, which I see her frequently now. She's a freaking badass and she looks great. I know she's been through some stuff in her life, because to me, it looks like, I think she's single. She's got a little boy that she's raising and everything, but she kicks butt in the gym. She looks good, different things like that. But every time I see her put up a post on Instagram or put up a story on Instagram, it's always got some sort of filter that is not showing who she really is. That's not showing her true face. It's like this thing that makes her face kind of look painted. I mean, not like painted like a costume, but you could tell it's not her real complexion. And I know her well enough to where I actually stopped her the other day as I was coming into the gym. She was exiting. And, you know, we chatted for a bit and I said, you know, I said, can I tell you something and have you take it respectfully and have you not, you know, not be offended by what I'm saying. I really, really want to tell you something that should actually be encouraging to you. And I just preface it that way because I know some women can be sensitive with things like that. And I said, you know, I see your posts all the time. I see your Instagram stories all the time. Why don't you ever show a true picture of yourself? You have no reason to hide behind that filter. You look great. You have an awesome body. You're an awesome person. Why do you hide why do you hide yourself behind a filter when you don't need it? And yes, she took it very, very well. And she took it as a compliment, but she still hasn't changed it quite. I did notice the other day she put a story out and had a lighter filter on there. I did notice that, but you know, it's stuff like that where I just kind of feel like sometimes someone like me giving a word like that would, put a big enough splash or a small enough splash in the pond to make a bigger impact in somebody's life. So, I mean, all that to just speak to what you were talking about, Aldwyn, as far as, you know, how damaging this Instagram, Facebook story world is and how it can like really, you know, just affect us. Because you've got someone like her who is absolutely beautiful and gorgeous hiding behind a filter when she doesn't need to.
Yes, I think of that You're Beautiful song. You know, we are actually remarkable human beings, and exactly as we are, exactly as we're not, the more we can embrace, I believe, our beauty without arrogance, right? There is a difference between confidence and arrogance, and there is this kind of image now on, you know, and with all these filters on Instagram, etc., that people think they have to look perfect or they have to look like some supermodel, and you've got all these women with these puffed up lips and puffed up boobs and, you know, puffed up bums. I mean, it's just all over the place, you know, and you don't need all that stuff to actually embrace your beauty. In fact, for a lot of people, they actually just look like stunned mullets. And I would say, look, you know, just come back to actually owning and accepting yourself exactly as you are, exactly as you're not. You beat 1 billion swimmers to get to the finish line just by being born. People often forget that too. And we have been dumbed down and shut down by society. And, you know, growing up, I went to Mossman High School in Sydney, and people used to say, you're a keen bean and you love yourself and things like that in high school. They used to knock you when you had some sense of self-respect and self-worth, you know. And so people often dumb themselves down, and then they just played smaller lives, and they shrunk away and became very self-destructive and took a lot of drugs and drank a lot and just went totally off the rails. And this is why we're seeing the mental health situation we're seeing seeing out there now. This is why we're seeing like the Walking Dead out there. It's like num-numville. I call them num-nums. I see them walking around, and I'm sure they're not really num-nums, but they're behaving like num-nums, right? And this is the thing. The more we can tap into this enlightenment, we are actually all connected, right? And the sooner that we can actually get conscious to where we've been unconscious to how amazing we truly are, the less we'll be doing these Instagram filters, and we'll actually own ourselves. Like, how many women out there actually do a live video on social media with no makeup? Now, I've got makeup on today. I just happen to have there's many videos I've done with no makeup, with my hair not done, and then there'll be others say, oh no, I'd never put myself out online like that, as an example, right? And of course, men, and who knows what gender people are nowadays. It's all become so screwed up, but each to their own on that one. Let's not go down that rabbit hole, but basically what I'm trying to say here is that you are extraordinary. You are extraordinary just by being alive, and we are all interconnected. We're all part of this quantum field, this omnipresence, this, and it's actually just silencing the monkey chatter, the busyness, the craziness that is self-created. It's all a choice, and coming back to presence, and with practices such as meditation, that will actually lead to this enlightened state more and more. And it is a journey, as you say, Tom, and I'm sure you've done a hell of a lot of work on yourself as well over the years, and it's an ongoing journey, right? And so it's important to actually have the discipline of keeping these practices up, I believe. What are some other tips too, Tom, around how to have a more enlightened life, and anything else around the truth about enlightenment that you'd like to share too?
Yeah, I think one of the main truths about enlightenment is that we all have it within us. We don't acquire it, we don't buy it, we don't find it on Instagram. It's an inherent state that is the essence of us in the subtlest aspect, the subtlest being beyond the thinking mind, the physical form and emotional form. And to transcend those three dimensions into the subtle field of spirit. And that's where enlightenment starts to be made realized. And they talk about self-realization. Enlightenment is self-realization, the realization of the nature of the self. And so that's a critical step in the process of enlightenment, is to put aside time for that. And then the embodiment of that. So enlightenment has to be embodied. So we must have a congruency and an alignment between our thinking mind, our feeling body, and our physicality with that pureness of our divine quality or spirituality. And that's where we do, obviously eating the right foods, reading the right books, hang out with the aligned people, listening to aligned information podcasts and TV, and, just being very discerning and filtering and mindful of the way we're living our life, living and breathing our life.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And it's part of why I started the Global Good News Challenge, sharing gratitude and good news, because I always say, no matter how bad or hard things may seem in the world, there's always something we can be grateful for, right? And coming back to gratitude, I think, is one of the quickest and easiest ways to shift state and to come back to presence, just coming back to gratitude. And I love the fact in America that there's Thanksgiving. There's Thanksgiving. I think Thanksgiving ideally should be something we do every day, is something, there's always something to be grateful for every single day. And I think just getting conscious to where we've been unconscious will make the world a difference. Now, Tom, you also have 6 books that you've put out. Can you tell us about your books, please?
Yeah, so we've got the Portal book, which came with the film, and that's really a deepening journey into those 6 stories and the 3 futurists that we talked about in the film, or talked with in the film. Then I got a book on how to experience freedom from anxiety and depression, which is a 12-step guide to overcoming anxiety, called Faster, Deeper, Calm. We've got a book called Missy Moo Meditates that my wife and I wrote, which is about Missy Moo teaching her sister Boo how to meditate, and that's for 5 to 8-year-olds. And then I've got, what else is there? There's a book called Fast, Deeper, Sleep, which is a 12-step guide to overcoming insomnia and finding your way to sleeping better. Spirit and Soul, which explores the 7 states of consciousness, which is looking at the journey into enlightenment and what are the stages or the processes that we go through in that journey there.
Amazing. Now, we do have to wrap up. I know you've got to run off soon, Tom. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. For people who want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Ideally, just go to tomcronin.com. They'll be able to find everything there. I'd love to hear from people on Instagram. I reply to all my messages, so you can send me a message at Tom Cronin, one word, Tom Cronin, on Instagram. It's probably where I'm most of the time. And they can find the Portal film and book either on my website, going to that, or go to entertheportal.com, and they can find it all there. And the film will be, I think we're going to be making it free just in a few weeks' time. So everyone will be able to watch that across the world for free, which would be pretty exciting.
Fantastic. Excellent. And we do have a comment here from someone on LinkedIn as well. Thank you, LinkedIn user. We can't see who you are, but they're saying, loved listening and learning from the fascinating, profound conversations. Huge thanks to Aldwyn for a tremendous effort to help people seek the truth and elevate our consciousness. Tom's film, The Portal, to heal our traumas and move humanity forward, can be viewed at entertheportal.com/watch-the-film/ you can see that there in the comments. Thank you, LinkedIn user. Thank you, Vinyesh here. He says, I love you, lady. Thank you, Vinyesh. I've got a fan there. Thank you, Vinyesh. Appreciate that. And we've got Renee Farrell on Facebook. Thank you, Renee. That was you, the Facebook user there. Thanks for letting us know. Awesome. And Ken, how can people connect with you?
I'll mute Ken.
Oh, there we are. And
yeah, see, that's why I don't like keeping myself muted, because I keep forgetting. But anyhow, you can find all the links for me on my link tree, which I did share with you. Aldwyn, you should have that up there. At the very top of my link tree are the three most important links: my calendar link, my Facebook group, and then I believe my website's also on there. So reach out to me there, connect with me there. Love to chat.
Fantastic. And that is linktree/fatfighterken, linktr.ee/fatfighterken. And for those who want to connect with me, just go to linktree/Aldwyn, linktr.ee/Aldwyn. And we like to wrap up here with a quote or motto that we live by. And so, Ken, would you like to share?
Yes. Treat the word impossible as nothing more than motivation. That is by Donald J. Trump.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ken. And Tom, do you have a favorite quote or motto that you like to live by?
I do. It's called Yad Bhavam Tat Bhavati. What we think we become. So getting clear on what our thoughts are.
Repeat that again. What was that?
It's a Sanskrit phrase, Yad Bhavam Tat Bhavati. And it means what we think we become.
What we think we become. I love it. And I will share from Gandhi, be the change you wish to see in the world. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Tom, for coming on as our guest. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you to my amazing co-host, Ken. Any final words before we wrap up?
Thanks for sharing space, everyone. It's been great to have company with you. And hopefully you found some insights and some inspiration to move life forward.
Thank you so much. And for those who have joined us, thank you so much for joining us. Let us know, what did you get out of this conversation in the comments here? Share the love if you know that others can benefit from this podcast or vodcast, wherever you are consuming this right now. And please do like also the Total Truth Show on Facebook. Come and connect and see some of our other episodes as well there, and on we're also on BitChute, Rumble, and the podcast channels as well. Sending you lots of love. Have a beautiful day or night wherever you are in the world. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.